Fate and progress. These two words, more than any others, describe the story of Kjerag. The land of snow is once more faced with the challenges that all countries who wish to modernize are, losing one's faith in the face of continued technological progress. Retracing our steps returns us to the snow-capped land of Kjerag as these worlds reach a newfound climax. NCOD Silverash leads the country into the modern world of Terra as his continued reforms bring both technology and science to the land of fate. Kjeragandr's faithful within the country struggle with adapting their fate to the changing state of the world. Nowhere in the teachings of their goddess are these modern changes mentioned. However, regardless of progress, none would dare deny the existence of their goddess. After all, Kjerag has always been shielded by her, and nothing, not even progress, would change that. Right? Well, if I brought it up here, you can imagine that the status quo is changed. So get ready to hear the tale of the country's battle to hold on to their progress and fate. Victoria may have been the most powerful nation on Terra, but there was never a guarantee that such good times will last forever. For 4 decades after the fall of Gaul, they ruled over Terra as its mightiest nation. When their industry and expansionism stalled, the cracks in Victorian society emerged from beneath the surface. The last king attempted to forge a new path for Victoria, and those bum-ass dukes cooed his ass for the audacity of considering giving the peasants rights. However, even with a decade having passed since the death of the Lord of Lions, the dukes have been unable to set aside their differences, and conflicts within the country are reaching a boiling point. NCODs make such inflammatory statements within the presence of Victoria's most influential duke, the Duke of Kjeragandr. His provocations are necessary to get our attention though. He is but a distant relative from the unknown lands of Kjerag. Regardless, he offers the resources of Kjerag to Kjeragandr. With her industry, Kjerag will no doubt transform into a powerhouse of industry. He promises her that with her aid, the name Kjerag will be in the next 30 years on the lips of all the nations of Terra. And, true to his words, around a decade after their meeting, Kjerag has transformed from what Victoria would consider a primitive country to a nation of technological progress. In December of the Terran year 1101, Kjerag faces a new challenge. The Great Elder of the Vinebead Court is on his deathbed. Since his poisoning during the Snowcap incident, his health has been declining, and in his final moments, he meets with the Corlan Saintess Enya. For years, doctors have tried and failed to purge his body of the poison. The night before, he dreamt of Kjeragandr and knew his time was coming. He confesses to Enya how in his waning years, he has not heard the voice of Kjeragandr. Before passing away, he prophesied that Originium would bring calamity to her people, and Kjeragandr would abandon them. While the Elder is dying, the Browntails are welcoming new life. Cirrus and Yucatan welcome their first kids to the world, Oak and Berry. Not the most creative of names, but considering the first landship of Kjerag is named Walnut, I am not surprised. After being in labor for hours, Cirrus feels the cold of Kjerag deeper than any other. Varatos, meanwhile, was completely stressed out by her sister's labor and ignores a message from Munch. Munch, despite her close relationship with the Browntails, is not able to be present for the event as she is chasing down a Rhine Lab employee, Carolyn. The woman had stolen what Munch believed were military secrets of Kjerag, and she managed to catch her in the train station. To escape, Carolyn screams that there is a bomb and flees into the mountain. This action will inadvertently save some lives. It is, however, not enough to shake Munch, and she is once more cornered. So Carolyn reveals to Munch that it is not military secrets she carries, but information on the weather. Taunting Munch, Carolyn tells her that her god won't protect her forever. And as she says this, the pair are hit by an avalanche, the first catastrophe in Kjerag's long history. Relief forces from the Silverash and Palaroge clans led by Matterhorn and Arktos arrive at the scene of the disaster. The entire train station has been swept away by the avalanche. With help from Rhodes Island first responders, the group begins rescue efforts. Dagenrecker meanwhile leads a team up the mountain to determine the cause of this disaster. This is Palaroge land, and Arktos reassures Matterhorn that all necessary avalanche prevention works had been completed. Thankfully, the answer is presented then by a member of Dagenrecker's party. A small, black rock was found in the snow. Ensiodes, learning of the nature of the disaster from Dagenbrücker, realizes that they can't keep knowledge of it under wraps and calls a meeting of the Tri-Clan leaders and dispatches Gnosis to the Rhine Observation Center. The people of Kjerag are left questioning Kjeragandr and turn to the Vinebead court for answers. For long has their god shielded them from catastrophes, and when told of the Great Elder's prophecy by Enya, deny the possibility of such an occurrence. Some of the clerics even believe it is the wrath of the goddess for the blasphemy of allowing non-believers onto the mountain. Enya silences these outcries. The Vinebead court must act as a guiding force for Kjerag's people and not allow panic and fear to be spread by the thought that Kjeragandr has abandoned them. Leaving the new Great Elder, Adso, in charge of overseeing the duties of the Vinebead court, Enya retreats into her study to study the ancient scriptures and hear the voice of Kjeragandr. Upon entering her study, she calls for her headmaid Yer, only to be met with silence. Only a scroll of Kjeragandr's scriptures and a mirror reflecting her helpless expression are in the room with her. The proxy of Kjeragandr is missing. Gnosis leads a team of Silver Ash clan soldiers to the Rhinelab outpost. The Rhinelab's observation post was set up following an agreement between Rhinelabs and Colan Trade following the events of Ride to Lake Sylvanhurds. Thanks to their combined efforts, the lab was completed quickly and has been operating for 2 months. The main on-site staff consist of Mulesies, the Director of Ecology in charge of studying the wildlife of Kjerag, Silence, the representative of the Scientific Ethics Committee, although she isn't present for this meeting, and Elina Orbika, one of the station's leading researchers. A bit of a step up following her efforts during the events of Dorothy's vision. The two women aren't too fond of Gnosis surrounding the outpost with armed guards. Gnosis, however, is unperturbed and informs them that one of their researchers was spotted in a restricted military zone. Mulesies reminds him that they are under no requirement to comply with such an investigation. This is true, and Gnosis asks her for the data on the center's observation logs. Elina tells him that their station detected nothing abnormal, and if they want a catastrophe warning system, they should go and negotiate one with Rhine Labs instead of coming here. Gnosis thanks her for the enlightening monologue and requests a copy of the center's observation data. While getting the data for him, Elina notices an abnormality. Someone has altered the data. The day before the catastrophe struck, Carolyn was the only one on observation duty, the very woman missing right now. Although, before they can reflect on that too much, the reason NCOD sent guards with Gnosis presents itself. Outside the observation station, the people of Kjerag have come to curse those who brought the wrath of Kjeragandr upon them. With the crowd's fury reaching its pitch, Gnosis emerges with his guards to disperse them. The people are reluctant to disperse, and an old woman throws snow in his face, calling upon Kjeragandr to forgive his sins. Undeterred, he disperses the crowd. Down the mountain, reporters from Victoria come to record the aftermath of Kjerag's first catastrophe. Despite the disaster, the people of Kjerag's fate remain strong. One of the reporters, Alberta, ends up meeting with Encia by chance and is able to interview one of the Silver Ashes about their thoughts on the disaster. Encia is concerned for all the people affected by the disaster, but in her mind, it's no worse than any other catastrophe that hits Terra. In town, a retired Victorian soldier, Lisbon, who had recently married a Kjerag local Freya, hands out supplies to those affected by the catastrophe. While in the process of doing that, Harold, his old boss, shows up. Victoria, specifically the Duke of Castor, has sent aid to Kjerag. At Colan Trade, NCODs meets with Victorian and Colombian ambassadors, a beautiful black queen, and a man who hasn't accepted the fate of his hairline. While Victoria offers aid, some of which has already arrived, Colombia questions the ability of this fledgling nation to defend its researchers. NCODs survives the meeting and immediately meets with Gnosis to discuss the catastrophe. Gnosis had spotted a few instigators in the crowd, but was unable to apprehend any. NCODs has his suspicions about them, but has no time to worry about that now, as he must meet with the other heads of the clans. Oktos is furious that Victorians are marching freely through their lands, and the normally reasonable Ratatos sides with him on the Victorian question. Tensions are clearly high, but before an agreement can be reached, Silverash is summoned by the Vinebead court. Within the Vinebead court, Enya meets with Adso. The two discuss the catastrophe and how they can calm the people of Kjerag. Adso cannot offer anything concrete, but reassures Enya that Kjeragandr would never abandon Kjerag. So he suggests a pilgrimage. The last time Kjeragandr left Kjerag, it was a saintess who brought her back, and so the task falls to Enya. Even if nothing comes of it, the court can use her pilgrimage to soothe the concerns of the people. With a plan in mind, Enya summons her brother. The two talk for the first time in a long while. They discuss Kjerag. Enya conveys to Ensiodes the importance of unity, and to hold the country together, she will depart on the pilgrimage of the Saintess. Ensiodes is against the pilgrimage. It is normally undertaken during the spring, not the dead of winter. Enya dismisses his concerns. This is what must be done for the good of the spiritual health of Kjerag. Kjeragandr has not abandoned Kjerag, and the next morning, Enya sets out to find the goddess. A few days later, the Victorian ambassador meets with Radatus in an attempt to make an inroad with a different clan. The ambassador believes that Radatus is just as, if not more suitable to lead the discussions with Victoria than Ensiodes. Despite his best efforts though, Radatus doesn't budge and sends him away. Around the same time, the Vinebead court summons Silverash and Palarosh. As Encia is at home when the summons arrive, she leaves in Ensiodes' place. Octos and Gulo go as representatives of Clan Palarosh, and as they are driving there, they are struck by falling rocks, with Gulo taking a severe blow on the head. My beautiful goat wife Dagenbrücke meanwhile catches up with Encia's car and manages to rescue her from hanging on the side of a cliff. Another car had run into her. As you can imagine, this seeming attack on two of the clans doesn't go over well, and Octos accuses Radatos of attempting to assassinate him and Ensiodes. Thankfully, Ensiodes manages to convince him that it was likely an attack by the Victorians, who must have hoped to paint the Browntails as the culprits. Worried that they might target his sister, Ensiodes dispatches Dagenbrücke to track down and protect Enya from assassins. Unfortunately for Ensiodes, Enya had already been attacked. While traveling in the forest, she was shot in the leg. Fortunately, she is rescued by a local hunter, Joanna, who manages to kill her attackers and bring Enya to her home. Joanna is initially hostile towards Enya. She is a member of Clan Silverash, and she harbors a deep resentment for that clan due to their disregard for the natural environment of Kjerag. However, once her identity as the Saintess is revealed, Joanna suddenly has to process her disdain for the Silverash and her fate in Kjerag. Regardless of her feelings, she promises to protect the Saintess no matter what. Later that evening, the two are surrounded by Victorian assassins, and using the home field advantage, they manage to take down enough of them to flee into the forest. Slowly but surely, they take down all but one of the assailants, and before that man can kill them, Dagenbrücke arrives and takes the assassin down in one blow. Joanna, unsure if she is friendly or not, fires an arrow at her, but Dagenbrücke catches that shit out of the air with no difficulty. Enya explains who she is, and the trio examine the attackers. They are wearing Palarosh armor, although they are using arrows that are made in the Silverash style. Cleaning up the scene of the crime, Dagenbrücke leaves the Saintess behind and returns to Ensiodes. Her presence here would only attract attention, and by leaving, Enya can travel without fear of attack. Radatos, having been forced into a corner by the assassination attempt on the other clan leaders, turns to the Victorians. In exchange for the safety of Clan Browntail, she will aid the Victorians in wiping out the other clans. She sends an invitation to Octos, inviting him to meet with her, and has the Victorians on standby to demonstrate their goodwill. Octos expects it to be a trap and gathers his soldiers before heading out to meet with her. His convoy is stopped by Browntail guards, and Octos has his soldiers search the Browntail estate. The Palarosh discover and subdue the Victorians, and the Browntails capture the rest. Radatus had used the scenario as an opportunity to take out Victorian spies. However, as the matter seems settled, the Browntail house bursts into flames, with the only remains of Radatus being her charred jacket. The next day, a funeral is held for Radatus at the Vinebead court. With her death, Cyrus is now the head of Clan Browntail. After the funeral is completed, Cyrus meets with Octos and Matterhorn to discuss what to do with the Victorian spies. Octos hasn't been able to get any information out of them, and suggests killing them after a trial. Before any decision can be reached, once more an emissary of the Vinebead court interrupts a meeting between the clans. Father Frey informs them of the court's will to handle the spies. Despite the others' objections, Cyrus allows the court to take the spies into their custody. Unfortunately for Kjerag, the situation is about to get worse, as the Duke of Castor sends Ensiodes a letter informing him of her intentions to deepen the industrial ties between Kjerag and Victoria. Out of concern for the damage caused by the catastrophe, she will offer Kjerag the necessary aid. For a price, of course. Later, while going through her sister's things, Cyrus discovers a communicator and learns that Radatus had been working with Carlan Trade to capture a suspected spy, and Munch was the woman on the case. At the Kjerag observation station, Gnosis and Silence meet to discuss Carolyn. Silence isn't really giving him any useful information in regards to her past, but he can at least get the location where she carried out her fieldwork. Elena, meanwhile, is attempting to find the missing data Carolyn tampered with. Mulesies provides her with much needed coffee, and thanks to the elf giving her brain a break from data work, Elena gets the idea to check the audio recordings. By analysing the data, she concludes that something fell from the star pod the night before the catastrophe. Whatever was protecting Kjerag must have been disrupted when it fell. Believing that Carolyn is actually searching for this object, Elena sets off to try to find it. She sneaks into the Vinebead Court to find a complete map of Kjerag to work off of. While there, she is discovered by Enya and Joanna. Elena explains her theory to Enya, that an originium field caused by an originium vein is what protected Kjerag for all of its history, and that when an object fell from the sky, the field was disrupted and a catastrophe could strike Kjerag. Enya isn't fully convinced, but believes this object may have harmed Kjeragandr in some way, so provides Elena with a map of Kjerag. The newly formed trio head for the suspected site of the fallen object, the Kjerag Casimira's mine. Before they set out though, Elena sends a letter to Gnosis informing him of her findings. On their travels to the mine, Elena and Joanna clash over the differing beliefs. Speaking of differing beliefs, this is post-editing bionic here. It was only at this point during the recording process that I realized I had been pronouncing Elena's name wrong this entire time. I don't know who Elena is, but she certainly is not Elena. It is up to Enya to try to mediate between the two on their journey and keep the peace. Learning that the Victorians are heading for the mines, the trio redouble their speed, only to get a warning no one wanted. A second catastrophe is beginning to form over Kjerag. Elena, back when she was sending her letter to Gnosis, had no idea how close she was to Carolyn. Carolyn had been holed up with Mont since the catastrophe, but she couldn't afford to wait with her any longer. Leaving the woman behind, she heads out to meet with those who have been aiding her, a member of the Vinebead Court, Father Frey. All that remains before they can escort her to freedom is to wait for the Victorian inspection of the mines to be complete. The Duke of Castor, using intelligence provided by the Trilby Asher, Mr. Bellingham, or Belly as he is called by Castor, bought out Casimira's share in the mines, and, to take advantage of the situation, dispatches some inspectors to ensure nothing improper is happening at the mine. Also, Castor asks Belly to ensure that Victorian reporters don't interfere with foreign affairs. As she is asking this of her Trilby Ashers, Adso is giving an interview to the Victorians. The reporter is hoping for a soundbite denying Kjeragandr, but receives nothing of the sort. Adso dismisses the Victorians' lack of faith as them admiring strength. Might makes right is a lovely thing, but that just means that the Sorkas conquering Londinium was only wrong because they ended up losing in the end. Adso admits that Kjerag is going through a trial of fate, but is not caused by the catastrophe, but Ensiodes. Cirrus, having learned of Monch's mission, meets with Ensiodes to question him about his dealings with her sister. Before he can give her an answer, their conversation is interrupted by the Vinebead Court. What's this, the third time this has happened, this event? The court accuses him of illegally colluding with the Victorians following their acquisition of the mines, and summons him to the court for interrogation. Recognizing that the court has been colluding with Victoria, Ensiodes agrees to their demands, but requests some time to gather all the documents related to his dealings with Victoria. Taking advantage of Cirrus's presence, Ensiodes, using the pretext of formally inviting her to a dinner, thanking her for looking after Encia following the assassination attempt, gives her the location they had tracked Munch to, allowing for her to rescue her missing subordinate. Gnosis meanwhile meets with the Victorian ambassador, who demands that he is allowed to inspect the mine thoroughly. Although the ambassador discovers the evidence of Kjerag's weapon manufacturing, this was something Gnosis anticipated. Using the satisfied Victorian ambassador's arrogance against him, after he leaves, Gnosis doubles back and discovers the Vinebead Court representative, who is escorting Carolyn. Although Father Frey expected something like this to happen and had let Carolyn escape on foot earlier. From here, Carolyn slips out of Kjerag, although she was not a Victorian spy in the end. Melander, the Colombian version of the CIA, had implanted her in Ryan Labs and rescued her from the Victorians before making their escape from Kjerag. With both parties distracted, Enya enters the mines via an abandoned mineshaft. Unfortunately, this is not the location they are looking for. This is an Oriron mine, not an Originium mine. Both Enya and Elena are disappointed by this, but Joanna's fate in Kjeragandr does not allow her to give up hope in their quest. Calling upon Enya to use her bell to call out to Kjeragandr, the resulting chime is exactly like the sound recorded by the observation station. Elena thinks back on the conversation she had with Carolyn about the Ferrant theory. Could such a force really be real and Colombian science had no knowledge of it? When questioned on the origin of the bell, Enya reveals its design dates back to when the saintesses of old climbed the mountain in search of Kjeragandr. Elena now believes that the mountain itself must be acting as a bell chime and deduces that there must be a hollow point somewhere causing this effect. Reflecting on the history of Kjerag, Enya decides that it can only be in one place, the summit of Mount Cowlan. Arriving at the Vinebead court, Ensiodes has Dagenbrooker and her soldiers surround the court so that none may leave until he and Adso have reached a conclusion on the court's accusations. Adso accuses Ensiodes of trying to use force to get the court to side with him, but Ensiodes ignores such provocations. He reveals to Adso that he is well aware of his dealings with the Duke of Castor, and with Gnosis currently in the process of getting that evidence for him, all they must do is wait. Outside their meeting, locals summoned by the court begin to swarm Dagenbrooker and her guards. Adso correctly deduced that Ensiodes would never turn his weapons upon the people of Kjerag. Unfortunately for Adso, the people don't provide the breakthrough that he's looking for, so he takes the opportunity to be honest with Ensiodes. Adso views Ensiodes as the ultimate ally of the Victorians and revealed to him that he has dealt with such apostates before. As the younger cousin of Clan Browntail's previous patriarch, Adso worked within the court to strengthen his clan. Ensiodes is not the first Silver Ash to seek radical progress, and Adso reveals to him that he was responsible for the death of his parents. Unfortunately for him, this level of rage bait is ineffective on Ensiodes, and once Gnosis arrives before the fray, Adso and the other court elders are placed under arrest for conspiracy against Kjerag. With tensions in Kjerag reaching a boiling point following the arrest of the court, Victorians have become public enemy number one. Harold has a short meeting with Ensiodes announcing his departure from Kjerag. Both men hope that they can meet in Kjerag again on better terms in the future. Ensiodes, despite outmaneuvering the court, faces extreme public backlash following everything he has done to the court and the Castor propaganda news cycle, and decides to retire from Cowlan trade. Gnosis is appointed as the new CEO and immediately publicly announces that Cowlan trade shall cease all collaborations with Victoria. Backlash from Victoria is announced almost immediately, with Castor disseminating a public letter slandering Ensiodes and Cowlan trade and announcing Castor's intentions of coming to Kjerag personally to see that things are carried out properly. High up on the mountains of Kjerag, Ensiodes and Gnosis watches as the fleet of Castor arrives. This is no mere political visit. If Ensiodes proves difficult, then for the first time in Kjerag's history, modern war will come for the untouched land. Castor, aboard the Gloriana, decides that he can give the boy 6 hours before it comes to that though. It's not just unrest from outside forces that Kjerag must deal with. Within the prison Adso is being held in, Adso turns the faithful upon the wicked and is able to walk freely out of his confinement. Adso seeks refuge upon Mount Cowlan, where he is discovered by Enya. Adso is shocked to see her here, but Enya has simply been searching for Kjeragandr, and this is where that path has led her. Adso, seeing no point in hiding the truth from her, reveals that he deceived her into going on this pilgrimage. With her missing, he hoped to turn Kjerag upon Ensiodes and expel the Victorians. Unfortunately, Ensiodes acted far quicker than he expected. Enya will not stop her pilgrimage and reveals to him that a second catastrophe is upon them. Adso tells her that it is meaningless to search any further as Kjeragandr does not exist. She is a creation of the court. Nature's meaningless eccentricities given character. Adso had long studied the text, but none confirmed her existence. Kjerag is a country of fate, and that fate needed something to worship. Why shouldn't it be a loving god? Enya rejects this idea. She has found the path to the goddess, and she will take Adso along with her. Together, they shall see the truth of things. If Adso is right, Ensiodes will be banished from Kjerag. But when Enya is right, the court shall renounce all schemes against Ensiodes. So, remember that reporter from earlier, Alberta? Well, she ends up getting kidnapped by none other than an alive and well Ratatos, who faked her death to further expose Victorian plots in Kjerag. Ratatos believed the reporter to be a spy, but in actuality, she is a reporter that is refusing to print Castor propaganda, and the Victorians want her silenced. Dagenbrooker is dispatched to aid Ratatos in handling the situation regarding the reporters and arrives just in time as Castor has dispatched the Trilby Ashers to rescue the kidnapped Victorian. Dagenbrooker drives them off, but many Browntail guards are killed, and now the trio is forced to flee to the Vinebead court. With Castor's declaration of Victorians being held hostage by Kjerag, soldiers begin occupying the area to ensure the rescue of these people. Although it is only the forward operating elements of the army. Arctos takes his soldiers, and when more heavily armored Victorian elements try to enter, attacks them. 17 Trilby Ashers, meanwhile, begin their assault on the court. Death has come for Ratatos and Alberta, but standing between them and death is the Black Knight. Even as powerful as she is overcome by the sheer weight of numbers. The elite soldiers of Victoria drive her to her limits, and even beyond them. It is only the timely arrival of Rhodes Island elite operator Sharp and his team that drives the Trilby Ashers back. Ensiodes and the Doctor were in contact on the small chance that Castor escalated things to this point, and their planning together has paid off. Entirely unrelated to the story, but my goodness does Kjeragandr look fine in these CGs. Atop Mount Corlin, Enya's group reaches a cavern carved into the peak. It was here where clerics of the Vinebead Court hid during a revolt against them centuries ago. This cavern is supposedly where Kjeragandr resides, although it is simply just an empty cave. Adso has been here before and believes that upon seeing this empty cavern, Enya will agree with him. He leaves some time for her to accept the truth of their god's non-existence. However, Elena discovers a wall in the cavern is man-made. On Enya's instructions, Elena blows up the wall and reveals a sealed-off room. Adso refuses to enter. How can he? He rejected his god. He has no right to potentially see her now. Within, they discover a truth buried for centuries. Elena detects life signals. They are now inside something living. A Ferenmut. Surrounding them are what first appears to be ice sculptures, but in reality are the frozen bodies of past saintesses. Frozen here, all of the saintesses face the same direction, towards an ice sculpture of the one, the only Kjeragandr. Hearing her voice, Enya reaches out, and the moment her hand touches the statue, all of the faithful see visions of the goddess. Joanna sees the hunt where she was infected, only for Kjeragandr to heal her of her apathy. Adso sees his past where he and the patriarch of the Browntails conspired to place the Browntails on top of the clan structure, only for Kjeragandr to take the form of a fire that burned away his schemes. Enya, meanwhile, sees the past of Kjerag, how the clans came together and were enlightened by the goddess, how she left them, and how she returned. She appears before her saintess, the woman that she's been looking for this entire time, Yor. Yor reveals to Enya that she is in fact Kjeragandr, a Ferenmut as old as Terra's civilizations. They currently reside within her very body. Yor also takes the opportunity to reprimand her for taking on a pilgrimage in the middle of winter, calling her an idiot. Yor apologizes to Enya. She might be the only one of her followers she's ever called friend, but she can no longer stay by her side. Her time in Kjerag has ended. She sends her saintess away to free Kjerag from darkness. Upon awakening, Elena informs Enya that the catastrophe will strike Kjerag in the next 3 hours. With time limited, it is unlikely that they will get down the mountain in time, but they have to do something, and Enya has an idea. Meeting with Adso as they exit, he repents for his faithlessness. Enya, in her wisdom, recognizes that he may still yet aid Kjerag in the future, and so absolves him of his sins. And then, she departs for the top of Mount Corlin. She has one final prayer left to say. With the court secured, it is up to Ensiodes to bring the conflict with Victoria to a close. Meeting with Gnosis, Ensiodes informs him of his intended pact. He alone will meet with Castor aboard her battleship. Donning his new fit and ensuring Gnosis is taken in the sight, Ensiodes boards the Walnut and rides out to meet with Castor. Ensiodes arrives only a few minutes before Castor's deadline. For the first time, Ensiodes speaks as the sole authority of Kjerag. Ensiodes rejects Castor's proposal. There are a number of issues he has with it. However, he has come with some amendments he would like to have drawn up. Kjerag will sacrifice 80% of its materials to Castor, with the stipulation that Victoria provides the mining equipment, specialized consultants, and workers. Additionally, all Victorian soldiers will be barred from stepping foot on Kjerag, and Kjerag must maintain complete sovereignty over its borders. Castor finds the whole thing to be farcical. She is the one with the war fleet here. As she voices these complaints, an artillery strike lands beside the Gloriana. Cirrus, having been given command of Kjerag's brand new artillery cannons, wants to begin leveling the fleet, but is restrained by sounder minds. Ensiodes informs Castor that Kjerag abandoned the idea of a fleet to defeat its foes. Instead, he transformed the mountains of Kjerag into an impenetrable fortress. Cannons line its mighty walls, and that aegis will not be cracked by Victoria. Castor is undeterred. Even if the casualties were enormous, taking Kjerag by force is still an option. After all, she might not know this, but Kjerag lacks the capabilities to truly defeat this force. Ensiodes is simply banking on good luck and hopefully the goddess's favor. Thankfully for Kjerag, someone has scaled the mountain to gain just that. Enya, atop the summit, prays to her goddess and friend, the final prayer of the saintess. She knows Yor would never abandon her and prays for her protection one last time. Across Kjerag, the Rhine Lab's observation station detects the catastrophe only to see it completely disappear. Adso too, on the verge of jumping from Mount Corlin, is stopped by the voice of his goddess. He looks up and witnesses a miracle. Kjeragandr says her goodbyes to Enya and promises to return to see her one day when the time is right. Upon the Gloriana, Castor sees the might of the goddess. Kjeragandr herself has blessed the path of Ensiodes, and in the face of such a power, even Castor must surrender the field. Kjerag has won, and thrown back the mightiest nation of Terra. After returning to court, Enya has settled into life once more. She has Adso and his co-conspirators sent to all the corners of Kjerag so that they may aid Kjeragandr's people in completing the winter farm work, and come spring they may return to the court. Gnosis meanwhile has to adjust to being the new CEO of Coral Trade. Dagenbrooker emerges from recovery to congratulate him on his new position. They had thought that Ensiodes might come and reclaim his position as CEO, but he seems content leaving things to Gnosis. Dagenbrooker seems to be considering moving on from Coral Trade and potentially leaving Kjerag behind her, although she promises that she will return to aid him should he require her services. Ensiodes meets with the Vice President of Colombia, Conrad Jackson, and I can only assume they compared birds, with Ensiodes not knowing the president was so close by. Jackson is impressed with how he handled the whole situation and offers Colombia's assistance in defending their borders. Ensiodes rejects his proposal though. Kjerag will develop to the point it can contend for itself on the world stage. After leaving the meeting, Ensiodes receives a call from the doctor. However, what they discussed is not revealed to us. In the end, Carolyn was never found, but Rhinelab, through an internal investigation, discovered she was in fact a spy. This saddens Elena, but she is comforted by Silence. Silence wonders if she will publish research on the Ferran she discovered, but Elena declines. Kjerag is a special place, and what she gleaned of Kjeragandr is not enough to publish anything concrete. She will remain in Kjerag and learn more before she ever considers publishing it. More importantly, she finally discovers the location of the object that fell from the starpod. Reaching the location, they discover a crater containing a gigantic floating orb with energy swirling off of it. A preliminary analysis reveals that the meteorite is made up of 70% unknown material. Unsurprisingly, because it came from space after all. More worrying though is the other 30%. It is the same makeup as elves. This of course shocks Mulesies, but it makes me think of a certain mysterious elf that might be hanging around Terra. Enya, who snuck out to the site, arrives just as they are analyzing the frequency emitting from the object. Looking at the readings Rhinelab shows her, Enya can only think of one thing, that it looks extremely similar to Kjerag writing. And with a little bit of help, she's able to translate the message. Destruction has arrived. I don't know how, I don't know why, but somehow Priestess is behind this. Do I have any proof of that? No, not really, but considering the presence that was revived at the end of the Master's Travels was called the Mysterious Elf, I would not be surprised if they had some form of connection to this meteorite. Although, that is purely speculation, because I don't think this specific plot point has even been touched on since. And if it has, those who read the Chinese version of the game have kept that shit on the down low. Regardless, this event was a fantastic conclusion to the Kjerag storyline, and I think the easiest way of discussing that is by looking at a few characters that fall under the words Fate and Progress. The most obvious characters in this event described by Fate are Adso and Enya. Adso is an old man, one who through his study of Kjeragandr lost his fate. As such, he has used the Vinebead court since as a foothold to mold the country in the way he saw fit, from killing those who would change Kjerag to resisting the modernization of the country. Enya meanwhile is a young saintess. Her decision to take up that position was not caused by fate, although she has proven to be Kjeragandr's most faithful servant. Throughout retracing her steps, we often see her struggle with her fate. Many times she seems to be just on the verge of saying that Kjeragandr isn't real. However, holding to her fate in the face of science, progress, and the fateless pays off, and for the first time in centuries, one of the faithful looks upon the goddess, although she only sees her friend Kjer. Even when Kjeragandr informs her that she will have to leave Kjerag behind, Enya climbs to the summit of a mountain just to pray to her goddess. With Kjerag threatened by a catastrophe and invasion, Enya places her faith in Kjeragandr one last time. Even if Kjeragandr isn't a true god, even if Kjeragandr leaves Kjerag behind, Enya does not falter, and her fate is rewarded. For the first time in recorded Terran history, a catastrophe that is forming is erased, and going forward, Kjerag can progress into the future with Enya reforming their fate for a world without Kjeragandr. Progress, meanwhile, is completely embodied by Ensiodes, although the Duke of Castor can be slot in here too. Ensiodes brought technological progress and the country's modernization. The Duke of Castor, coming from a country in decline, wishes to take advantage of the fledgling country and turn it into a production zone for Victoria. One sees progress as the act of moving forward, to improving your country's standing, to improving your nation's standing, to improving the individual lives of civilians. And the other sees progress as a tool that is to be used to maintain their own dynasty of power. NCODs must contend not only with the circling vultures, but those from within that wish to throw Kjerag back into the dark. However, NCODs knows that both paths lead only to destruction. Should Victoria claim Kjerag, the country will lose the ability to decide its own future for potentially centuries. And should those who reject modernization shut coal and trade down, Victoria will simply modernize the country by force. No, since announcing Kjerag as a power on the world stage, progress was their only option. Castor is, as previously mentioned and seen in the story, one who wished to take advantage of the conflicts caused by progress to strengthen herself. Victoria, as the most powerful nation on the surface of Terra, even if in decline, should be capable of taking over a country as small as Kjerag without issue. However, NCODs, despite being the bastion of progress in Kjerag, had faith in the future he was preparing for. For all his blasphemy, for all his abandonment of tradition, he was one of Kjeragandr's favorite children. How couldn't he be? He embodied the self-determined existence she wanted for all of her children. And so, to round out the discussion on fate and progress, we should discuss one who is a neither and both, Kjeragandr. The goddess of Kjerag should be above both fate and progress. After all, what need is a god of such human things? However, Faramut are not gods. Sure, they possess godlike power, but they are living beings. They are born and they die. So Kjeragandr, who learned from humans and loved those who called Kjerag their home, learned of this battle between fate and progress. She would have certainly fallen into the progress side of that dichotomy. After all, she never wished to be worshipped. In fact, she viewed the beginning of her religion as a failing of man. However, for one whose life lasts millennia, she saw the unifying effect of this fate on Kjerag. But she also saw the horrors it brought. What country could sacrifice so many young girls just to wake a goddess? But this fate was rewarded when she awoke for a saintess. From here, she would continue to observe her followers for centuries. It wasn't until Enya and NCODs took up positions of leadership that Kjeragandr witnessed a true change within Kjerag. In what must have seemed like a blink of an eye, her country was transformed. Although right as the country was moving past the need to rely on her, she was forced to leave. For the first time in her life, she must now also have fate. Fate in Kjerag. Fate in Enya to lead the country into the future. Maybe one day she may return to the faithful, but right now, destruction is coming. And she must be ready for that, so that Kjerag may survive. And that, my friends, is retracing our steps. This video is already a bit late, so I'll try not to delay it further by rambling on. However, it would be uncouth of me to not mention Kjeragandr again. We already knew she was a one-man army, and now we know even when facing off against the elite of other countries, she is a one-man army still. Be it against Trilby Asher, Emperor's Blades, Silverland's Pegasi, or the Shadow Cloaks of Yan, she will be able to stand against any of them and potentially take on far more than one at a single time. And you want to know why I'm bringing this up? Yes, you are in fact correct. This is a null upscale. Well, technically Casimiro's major winner's upscale, but you know, null is the primary one of those aside from Kjeragandr. Although I am still praying that we get the Blood Knight as a playable operator at some point. Shout out to the wonderful members of the factory. You are the faithful, believing in my return no matter how delayed. Y'all, be good people, and I will see you in the next one. So like low-key, Yor is the hottest Kjerag woman. And if I was Enya, Yor would not have had the chance to leave Kjerag because I would have made sure she couldn't walk.